Well, good afternoon, good evening, dear colleagues and alumni, students, friends of UCT, distinguished guests. Very warm welcome to you. I'm Professor Diavedi, the Interim Vice Chancellor, and it really is a great pleasure on behalf of the University and also the Department of Medicine in particular to welcome you to the 2023 Dr. Stuart John Saunders Lecture. We hold this event to honour the memory of our former Vice Chancellor and Professor of Medicine at UCT. The lecture series was launched in May 2018 and was made possible by Dr. Saunders' late wife Anita, whose intention was that it be an opportunity to pay tribute to the values demonstrated during her husband's tenure as Vice Chancellor and to his impact also on the medical profession and on scholarship. Stuart Saunders served as Vice Chancellor for 16 years, that is from 1981 to 1997. As Vice Chancellor, he demonstrated an unswerving commitment to academic freedom, clarity about the values that we espouse and need to live up to, the centrality of scholarship of a high standard, and a clear-eyed view of the path ahead as a university and country. Stuart Saunders led UCT through a turbulent period during which, with great courage, he challenged the malevolent impact on universities of apartheid in its various forms. His impact on medicine, whether the profession or scholarship, was immense. Stuart John Saunders was the epitome of a university leader. The first two Stuart John Saunders lectures were held in 2018 and 19, and then, of course, we had the pandemic and other circumstances which made it necessary to pause. But this pause is over, I'm pleased to say, and we are particularly pleased to be meeting here and to be meeting in person. Professor Demeko Ntusi, Department of Sciences faculty and co-host, will introduce our speaker shortly, but I'd just like first to touch on one aspect of the work and writings and scholarship of Felix Joseph Salazar, who's here on my left. This relates to the chair he holds, that of Distinguished Professor in Rhetoric and Humane Letters in the Faculty of Law at UCT, and his establishment of the Center for Rhetoric Studies, which focuses on research in public rhetoric, deliberative democracy, and argumentative culture. So the Cambridge Dictionary defines rhetoric as, I quote, speech or writing that is intended to influence people, the study of the ways of using language effectively, unquote. It's not to be confused with the manner in which arguments are sometimes dismissed as just rhetoric. You know? Professor Salazar has written and spoken about rhetoric as a means to bridge the many divides that we experience with and among other human beings. Turning to the links to academic freedom, which Stuart Saunders, of course, defended so stoutly, comes a number of academic responsibilities. Of course, to communicate one's scholarship and ideas, to make these accessible beyond the immediate community of specialists. And as far as rhetoric in the university is concerned, there's also the responsibility when engaging in debate and discourse, whether in relation to one's scholarship or more broadly, to do so in a respectful manner, to listen, to build, to improve understanding, to influence, to persuade, in other words, to know how to argue. Universities are, or should be, places of robust debate, but not of assertion and of vitriol. So, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me pleasure now to hand over to Professor Ntusi to introduce our speaker. Thank you.
Interim Vice Chancellor Professor Daya Reddy, the family of the late Professor Dr. Stuart Saunders, honored guests and friends of the University of Cape Town. It's a great pleasure to introduce this year's Dr. Stuart Saunders Memorial Lecture. However, before I do, I wish to make some brief reflection on the legacy of Dr. Stuart Saunders, who is remembered in this university for his role in ending racially segregated training of medical specialists at UCT as head of medicine. His courageous leadership also saw him overseeing the first admissions of students of all races into UCT residencies. He was forward-looking and invested heavily in future-proofing our university. Specifically, he established the UCT Legacy Society, and many of you will have pamphlets about the society in front of you. In addition, he initiated fundraising for the protection of academic freedom at UCT, which Professor Reddy has alluded to. Many of his contributions are elegantly described in his popular book, Health, Healthcare, and Professionalism in the 21st Century. Our speaker today, distinguished Professor Philip Joseph Salazar, is somebody who knew Stuart and Anita Saunders very well. And I cannot think of a better individual to deliver this year's lecture. Philip Joseph is an alumnus of Lycée Louis Le Grand and École Normale Supérieure in Paris. He holds 3 master's degrees, a doctorate, and a senior doctorate, all from the Sorbonne. He studied semiology with Roland Barthes, metaphysics with Emmanuel Levinas, and rhetoric with Marc Fumaroli, all leading scholars in their fields. He traveled to South Africa in 1978 at the age of 23 to undertake covert fieldwork on racial discourse for a PhD in anthropology. The South African intelligence seized the completed transcript in 1982, but the public viva took place at the Sorbonne in 1983. Meanwhile, in 1980, he published his first scholarly book in sociology, Idéologie et l'Opéra. He was appointed as the chair of French at UCT in 1986, Dean of Arts in 1993, and elected to the College of Fellows in 1995. That year, he founded the Center for Rhetoric Studies, pioneering the discipline in Africa. In 1998, he was elected Director of Rhetoric and Democracy at Jacques Derrida's Collège International de Philosophie. In 1999, he was appointed to a French professorial chair and to a distinguished professorship in rhetoric and humane letters at UCT. He chose to remain in South Africa and is now a distinguished professor in the Faculty of Law. In 2008, he was awarded the Harry Oppenheimer Fellowship. The National Research Foundation promoted him from an A rating to an A1 rating in 2008, a rating he has since held. He's been a board member of 30 scholarly journals and learned societies, and led 15 international projects in rhetoric in Argentina, China, France, Hungary, Morocco, Norway, Poland, Romania, Russia, and Sweden. Since 2000, he has delivered 110 plenaries, keynotes, and other guest lectures worldwide. Since his first scholarly publication in 1978 on power and preaching in the 15th century, Florence, he has published 25 book-length monographs, 15 co-authored volumes of scholarly editions, 110 chapters, 165 articles in English, French, German, Italian, Slavic languages, Spanish, and Arabic. And in 2022, the International Rhetoricians, under the editorship of Professor J. Bernard Nodier, presented him with a Jubilee book, The Critical Rhetoric of Philippe Joseph Salazar, to celebrate his 40th year at UCT and in rhetoric. Ladies and gentlemen, I invite Professor Salazar to invite this year's lecture.
Well, after this avalanche of praise, I should rather go home, I think, and bask in reflected glory. Can you hear me? Can speak up. Of course. Thank you. Is it better now? At the end, can you hear me? If you can't, move to the front. Right. Before I begin this lecture, I'd like to really thank Daya Reddy. I call him Daya Reddy, because we go back many, many years indeed. Our interim VC was Dean of Science when I was Dean of Arts. A faculty that doesn't exist anymore, much to my grief. And in a conversation one day, we floated the idea of merging arts and science. Didn't happen. We merged with ballet. I love ballet, I love opera. So for me, it's very moving to be presented by Daya tonight. And I never met Professor Ntouzi before, but as we met on the parking lot just now, I think there was an immediate recognition of civility and pleasantness, I must say. And you were kind enough to read the litany of what people think I have achieved. So thank you for that. Okay, I'm going to switch on now my timer. This lecture tonight is my way of paying tribute to Stuart and Anita Saunders. In my mind and in my heart, their names are irrevocably linked. Anita and I, we were colleagues back in 1983. And I had known Stuart Saunders since 1983. And I remember their religious marriage under a large tree at Glenara, when Glenara wasn't surrounded by barbed wire. Dr. Saunders insisted on doctor. Dr. Saunders cared for scholars. He told me once that chairing professorial selection committees was the most important duty of the Vice-Chancellor. Appointing chairs, as they were called then, was for him securing scholarship in each and every discipline, in days when there were only 1 or 2 professors per discipline. But that is how UCT rose under his watch to become Africa's leading research university, respected by corporate funders and with a wide network of alumni. We owe him what UCT is today. Anita Lowe, Mrs. Stuart Saunders. Stuart, in his memoirs, Vice-Chancellor on the Tightrope, when he recounted their falling in love, they literally fell in love, at first sight in 1983, quite simply wrote this about Anita. She was a scholar in her own right. Didn't say she was beautiful, she was smart, she was a scholar. Anita sacrificed her own scholarly career to stand by Stuart. In fact, she did not sacrifice it at all. She channeled her acumen toward the common good of this university. If people only knew how influential Anita had been in securing many ventures for this university, such as All Africa House, for instance, she would be awarded an honoris causa post-mortem. Maybe we should put her up for an honoris causa post-mortem. Last time, Stuart and I had dinner. In the 4 years or so after Anita passed away, we used to have dinner every second week. And that until he fell ill. And on the last dinner we were having, while watching the sun set behind Table Mountain, we discussed scholarship. He asked me, my boy, that's what he called me, my boy, tell me about scholarship. Well, we started to drink. I didn't tell him much. So this is why tonight I've chosen to talk about scholarship. Does my voice still carry to the back? Okay, thank you. The 9 Circles of Scholarship, that's the title. It is inspired, of course, by Dante's Divine Comedy on the screen. In his staggering poem about life, hell is the most important part, surely. We all know the phrase, abandon all hope, ye who enter. And he didn't mean UCT in that case. You know. So Dante needs no introduction. One of the greatest medieval scholars, besides being a poet whose work still inspires today 700 years later. And the author of a revolutionary work in rhetoric about the dignity and power of everyday language. All that Dante Alighieri achieved while he was hounded, exiled, condemned to death, to be burnt at stake for his political views. His towering scholarship and poetry grew in the hell of exile, persecution, and daily physical fear. So let us enter hell. And don't lose any hope. In the Divine Comedy, hell is divided in 9 circles, piled onto each other, in a sort of inverted tower made up of landscapes, rivers, bogs, inviting us to a sort of travel to the center of the earth and of ourselves. Each level deals with a particular vice. I know the word vice is no longer fashionable, but if we have virtues, we have vices, whether you like it or not. And I can assure you no Marvel movie, no internet game can rival the extraordinary narrative of Dante's traveling to the center of the earth, guided by his predecessor of the Augustan age, Virgil. So Dante's poem is an allegory of human life, and as far as I know, scholars are human beings. Those 9 circles of Dante's hell provide an interpretation of being a scholar. But being hell, what I'm going to give you is a negative reading. In other words, traveling down the 9 circles of hell provide an understanding of what scholars should not be. For you to do reverse engineering. That's your home exercise for this weekend. So it's not about the virtues of scholarship, all that is good and glorious and praiseworthy and rateable C to A and found as attractive, but it's about the phantoms, the ghosts that inhabit the morality of scholarship. In the Middle Ages, the sort of interpretation I'm going to develop in front of you tonight was called a tropological reading. So let's follow Dante and Virgil, circle to circle. In the first circle, right at the top, Dante meets, in particular, not only, but in particular, ancient philosophers, Greek thinkers such as Plato and Aristotle. Now, why are scholars of ancient Greece, the source of all scholarly knowledge at the time, from physics to medicine, from morals to logic, why are they in hell? And why are they at the most lukewarm level of hell? The reason is that the scholars of ancient wisdom, Western wisdom, they had perceived the truth of what it is to be a human being, be it by studying metaphysics or physics, medicine or logic. But that scholarly endeavors, wisdom as it was called, lacked something fundamental. They did not have the benefit of revelation, which for Dante was a way of explaining the connection between the human understanding of the universe and the universe. They perceived what the connection was, but what they lacked was a concept of the relationship between what a human being can achieve intellectually and the purpose of the universe within which the scholarly enterprise fits, which for Dante was its placement in the superior divine order. In short, ancient scholars had a percept, and that's a word, had a percept of the ultimate goal of scholarship. They did not have a true concept of it, that is, of the truth of nature. And we know that today the position of science toward faith is still very much debated. Now let's move into now, that was an allegorical reading. Now let's move now to a tropological translation with regard to scholarship. To be clever as a scientist or perceptive as a philosopher, to be intelligent and enterprising as a scholar, yet without a firm concept of truth, you are just that, I'm afraid, clever and perceptive. Often scholars stay there quite happily. They remain at the level of perceptions, of course, cleverly constructed, persuasively presented as concepts, but percepts nonetheless. Classical philosophy made a clear distinction between knowing, aisteta, and knowledge, noeta, knowing and knowledge. The internet is knowing, it's not knowledge. The debates on climate change, the controversies about the warring situation in Eastern Europe, all the opposing arguments regarding COVID and vaccinations, rest among scholars, I'm not talking about the public here, on a constant game and shift between percepts and concepts, opinions presented by scholars as veracity, and established facts or argument logically valid. So when scholars behave like the public, they fail being scholars. That's the tepid circle. In the second circle of hell, don't meet those who lead lives driven by love. Love, human love, is supposed to be what people, especially in the Western tradition, are made to believe as being a superior feeling. Some cultures do entirely without it, thank you very much. But how does love relate to scholarship? Again, we must translate. Scholars are not supposed to fall in love with ideas. Theirs or others. They are not supposed to be in love with what they think. They must maintain a distance. Getting infatuated with a topic, a research theme, an author, an idea is dangerous. And some of us get caught in that hellhole. Why? There is often a fetishist approach to a scholar's endeavors, just like love is in essence fetishist. Now, what is a fetish? A fetish, as you know, is a strategy of replacement. In its most serious form, someone who is deeply mentally disturbed will hallucinate that an object, a stone, a stick, is in reality the subject of desire, actual human being. Give you a simple example. Buying an expensive perfume or getting into debt for an expensive car are fetishist acts. Why? Because you replace the lifestyle you cannot afford in reality with a fetish of that lifestyle. You fulfill your desire, your love, but you hallucinate what you cannot have. In intellectual matters, the desire for fetishes is very strong drive, especially among younger scholars. It is a natural bend, but it leads to repetitive research. One cannot let go and move on. One clings to the fetish. One has found one's object of desire and one wants to stay with it. You can call it silo thinking if you want to. In reality, it's a fetish. One of my teachers, the great theoretician Roland Barthes, warned us in the little seminar, do not fetishize your dissertation into a book. That sort of fetish behavior is often encouraged by funding agencies. Many, not all, want to see a trajectory, a path, a journey, as they dare to say. They all read Paulo Coelho, you know, and a track record. They often look at deviation as proof of a lack of focus, and you drop 10%. Of course they would, since they think along managerial lines. So what is their fetish? The POLC device. Plan, organize, lead, control. Or even worse, lean management, where things got to move fast in one direction and produce deliverables. So when you hear productive about a scholar, hear the alarm bell ring. It's a red flag for a fetish. That sort of intrusion in the life of scholars produces, in my view, a poorer intellectual life, which doesn't mean a poorer academic life. These are two different things. The third circle, you know, as Karl Marx used to say, history is once tragedy, once comedy, or once comedy, once I never know, you know. With Marx, you actually never know. You got the young Marx and the later Marx, tend to contradict each other. So the third circle is comic. It's about gluttons, people stuffing their face. Forgive me for my French. That is figuratively about those who, instead of being satisfied with meeting basic bodily needs, always want more. In other words, their body has replaced their life. They are not human beings, the gluttons. They are recipients for other bodies: meat, vegetable, fruits, drinks. They eat animal and vegetal life in order to augment their own bodily life. In fact, I often wondered if the disgust strong-minded vegans feel towards meat eaters doesn't come from that carnivorous image of a body eating other bodies. Maybe anthropologically this is what is actually happening. But what about scholars? Scholars and gluttony, what is this? When I read verses from Canto 6 about the gluttons, and I look for the tropological meaning, then I'm reminded of an expression we all know, we all write here, body text. And then I think of bloated footnotes in research papers, or one word followed by a bracketed string of so-and-so, page such and such, sometimes running over an entire line. A gluttony of so-called references. Swelling the body of an article with other scholarship without usually any sort of pointed, coherent explanation between the word referenced and the stew of data. If you bracket, let's say, Habermas in relation to your sentence, I want to know exactly why. One of the dreadful things of the internet is that students and scholars are able to set up bibliographies in a flash. Have they actually read the stuff? So one feeds on anything that comes close and within grasp. It is an illness most perceptible in the social sciences, I'm afraid to say, less in the pure humanities, but scientific papers are far from exempt. There is also little value, same line of thought, in demanding from students in their apprenticeship of scholarship to chew on so-called literature reviews and then methodological chapters. I don't want that. What I want to see at work in the dissertation is how the sources are being activated, how the methodology is put in action. I don't want to see a chapter on this and a chapter on that, and then it goes through the window. This is not scholarship. This is management of knowledge. To put it in a formula, to refer to references is not a scholarly gesture, but to infer from references, that is a scholarly gesture. So it wasn't that comic, actually, the gluttons. In Hell 4, Dante casts, he's a great filmmaker, casts the misers and the spend-all. First, why are they stuck together in Hell 4? Because both are the two sides of the same delusion. They indulge in material goods either by accumulating them in order not to share them, or they indulge in throwing away everything without any regard to the value of each item, which is not a way of sharing, as sharing had to be discriminate in order to be real sharing. Generosity. So that is the allegorical meaning. The tropological meaning shed a different light on the perils of scholarship. How does a scholar hoard? What is a miser scholar, if I may say? A hoarder scholar indulges in never deviating from his or her primary hoarding, be it a doctoral dissertation or a first book. Everything always goes back to it. Niches are comfortable. You will be pleased to know that a niche in French is a dog box, by the way. Literally. Niches can be comfortable, but if you are alone in it, what is the value of being so specialized? By contrast, it is a reverse indulgence forever to turn yourself into an open house, have an open table, lay out whatever you have developed in terms of ideas to everyone. Large conferences, associations that spring up all the time, made worse by the virus emergency and even worse by the internet, workshops of this and that, training about X, Y, Z, compounding now by the invasive remote attendance procedures, all are perfect avenues for academic spandal. I have seen intelligent colleagues, smart and astute, erudite also, cast to the winds whatever they have achieved, just for the sake of being present at, being heard at, publishing in. Clearly, whether you hoard or you throw away, it has to do with value. You only hoard what you value, and you only give what you value. So let's go one step further. In scholarship, there is worth, and there is value. A scholar may have worth and less value. The difference between the two, worth and value, is the following. Worth is intrinsic. It resides within the field and discipline in which the scholar creates ideas. Value is extrinsic. It is assigned from outside through protocols of the field and the discipline. Worth. I remember a colleague who never wrote a single monograph. She wrote short notices in small journals, independent from the publishing industry. He never thought necessary to share beyond a small circle of like-minded scholars, nor to assemble notes in a book. That colleague placed no value in doing it, but knew the worth of it. The industrialization of academia discourages such type of scholarship. Value. Clearly, the prevailing ideology recoils at the worthy scholar. Scholars must have value for their institution, as the vast majority of them, especially in this country, of course, but not only, belong to academia. Value is then assigned by outside processes. You know what they are. I don't have to bore you with listing them. These processes are neither bad nor good. They are processes, and they reflect a current state of affairs in a managerial society. It is a fact, and that's what it is. Time to leave Hell 4. In Hell 5, it's getting really worse. As I told you, then you have to do at home reverse engineering. In divinity, you got negative theology and positive theology. So basically, I'm doing a gesture of negative theology here. Not quite, but you know. So now, secure in their frail skiff, as you can read in a bad novel, you know, secure in their frail skiff, Dante and Virgil now are floating on a stream of slime. And overboard, it's a sludge, it's terrible, you know. They look at a new group of possible scholars, the dissatisfied. A river of slime is a powerful allegory for those who see time and life pass by, flow by irremediably, irretrievably, and then fall into deep satisfaction as if they would fall into a sludge. Now, for the tropology. Being dissatisfied, especially when you're employed by a university, is, as you know, quite common. It might be the passion of an academic, being dissatisfied. To stay with academics, dissatisfaction ranges from annoyance to despondency, to hatred, to self-hatred, or also to disdainful or sorrowful withdrawal. In the classical theory of emotions, all that has an umbrella name, anger. Dante deals with another type of anger somewhere else. In case someone here is a Dante scholar and says, "You are wrong," you know. It is, I must say, one of the strangest features of scholarly life, a tendency to be dissatisfied, angry, which either befits sanguine character, then they are angry, or to be morose, which befits more reserved characters and temperaments. Aristotle, in his rhetoric, and I'd like to thank Professor Reddy and Professor Ntouzi for reminding you that I'm in rhetoric. So Aristotle, in his rhetoric, which contains the first fully fledged systematic theory of emotions, and far more importantly, of their impact in social and political life. The rhetoric is a book about politics, not about nice turns of phrase. So Aristotle in his rhetoric shows that anger, deep dissatisfaction, is the key emotion in social life. But anger surges forth for a reason. And anger appears in a group when there is a feeling, either a knowing or a knowledge, but let's say a feeling that one is treated unfairly, that natural justice has been impugned. For classical thought, deep dissatisfaction is the driving force of politics. It's from subdued to open rebellion. But it is always caused by a belief in an injustice having been committed. The dissatisfied usually believe they have been treated unfairly. The paradox is that, being intellectuals, all of us here, scholars have all the means at their disposal to reflect on and to analyze their own dissatisfaction. That is to move from opinion, belief, to fact and argument. After all, we spend our lives weighing hypotheses, testing results, refining conclusions. Their lives, our lives, are immersed not in a slimy slurry of bad ideas, but presumably bathed in the clear waters of reason. Isn't that so? And yet, an angry scholar, mildly or strongly dissatisfied, will channel one's sense of injustice and dissatisfaction rarely along lines of reason, but along lines of opinion, often ideological lines. Often, a dissatisfied scholar will turn a personal grievance into an intellectual battle, will rally forces, because it must be shown that necessarily it's not a personal grievance, it's a group grievance, valid for a whole community. Dissatisfaction and anger among scholars do produce results in terms of power. It is doubtful they produce scholarship. It can pass for scholarship because we are very smart, but it rarely is. Ideology is alienation. That is what Marxist philosophy teaches us. An ideological scholar is alienated on top of being dissatisfied. Conversely, a scholar who inflicts onto oneself the self-injury of withdrawing from confrontation, turning anger inwards, becomes melancholiac. In the Renaissance, it was deemed that melancholy was the right composure to be a scholar. A scholar is supposed to brood over matters of the mind, hence needs to retreat from too much intercourse, too much engagement, too much company, too many distractions, endless coffee cups in the common room. Do we still have common rooms? I don't think so. We don't. We have machines now, you see. It is a pleasant melancholy, a grove-like retreat. And the key word here is retreat. Retreat into what? Into an idea I now bring to you, which during a good millennium was central to the intellectual enterprise and no longer is. It's a Greek word, schole. The word school comes from it. In the classical world, and that of Dante, a scholar lives in and lives schole. The word scholar comes down in direct line from it, as I said. But the concept has changed. In the classical world, which lasted deep into the late 17th century, in any case, in Western Europe, schole means leisure, doing nothing. otium in Latin. Leisure to what end? To provide a scholar with time and quiet to think without the pressures of negotium, life outside, social engagement, in other words, working. School, the word, copies schole, the idea, and indeed schools should provide the quiet time necessary to learn without outside interference. Children who attend school should think about enslaved children who work in factories. They work, they don't go to school. Schole, peace and quiet to read and think, has always entertained, therefore, a complex relationship with work, real work, back-breaking work. We like to call ourselves intellectual workers, but we are not workers. Let's get real here, you know. We are not. It's an abuse of language which I detest. We are something else, but workers we are not. It is interesting that, don't tell that to management, of course, you know, because then we might be given lots of free time. Back to being serious now. It is interesting that in the 1930s, a French socialist invented a new sociological notion, society of leisure. The name was Dumas-Didier. More than an idea, it was an activism. With his team, after 1945, they put together training methods and implemented them in a working class to give workers leisure, that is time and space, schole, in other words, to cultivate their minds, to learn how to argue and analyze politics, that is, to reflect on why being exploited made them so angry and so dissatisfied. The society of leisure was a form of scholarship. No longer today. Today, leisure is quite the opposite of schole for the workers. Leisure is fabricated with consumer goods in order to pacify the dissatisfaction of workers, to prevent them from having time to think about their condition. They are not afforded schole, but merchandise to be distracted from their conditions and from thinking, and to extract more work out of them. To some, when a scholar who belongs to an institution is dissatisfied, the first question to ask is, are you angry because you are a worker? Are you a worker? Dante and Virgil are now standing, like me and you, at the gates of the city of hell. Those inside are the truly damned. We enter tragedy. In Hell 6, we find heretics, that is, religious dissenters, partisans, that is, political, say, fanatics. That would be Dante's term, not mine. I am setting aside the religious aspect, but I retain Dante's concept. Excuse me. What is a scholar who holds partisan views within the scholarly enterprise? Not outside of it, as a private individual or a citizen, engaged or not in society. Many are not, or go through the moves. But what of those who, inside scholarship, activate partisanship as a part or even a drive of their scholarship? In intellectual intercourse, scholars encounter, inside and outside academia, other intellectuals who are entirely devoted to a cause. That cause may be anything, but its function, when activated, is to override everything else. Scholarship is then expanded, or becomes an expansion of personal prejudices, of firmly held belief. Scholarship is put at the service of a set of opinions, a set of feelings, and a set of values. Opinions, feelings, values, that's rhetoric. It is secondary to reason. It is domesticated to serve a potent master who often suffers no contradiction. Yet there is a choice. And that is the meaning of the word heresy. Heresy is not religious in particular. In the classical world, it means a choice. The Latin formula in the Father of the Church was sententia humana. You are a heretic if you use human statement to contradict the divine scriptures. So in matters of belief, it refers to an intellectual choice. Scholars who allow themselves to push forward opinions about politics mostly, over truth, have chosen a set of beliefs as guidance for their erudite work. They have chosen to cast their scholarship into the mold, the chosen mold, the heretic mold, if you wish, of opinion they hold as correct. They become partisans. Some fields of inquiry are more fertile than others in allowing partisan choice to take over rational inquiry. Scholarship then often takes the publicized, claimed form of dissenting. And often that intellectual heresy and partisanship are presented, and that's the problem, as more dignified, more important, more ethical, more moral, more valuable, more useful than everything else. Those who really are in danger here are the young scholars. I worry a lot about young scholars, as you might have noticed. For young scholars to declare up front, I believe that, I am passionate about, gives them, that's for sure, they are 20, an emotional drive, of course. But is that a scholarly approach? When my master's and PhDs embark on a dissertation, and I've supervised now for more than 40 years actually, I always warn them, never begin your analysis, I'm talking about theses here, by knowing what you want to prove. Do not have a conclusive opinion on the matter. Let the evidence lead you to what is rightful, truthful, right conclusion. Never discard what goes against what you believe. You may not like it, as it may not fit your belief, but then you have three choices. First choice. You can review all the evidence you have in front of you, and then lay it out in such a way that it will give you the result you wish, in line with your belief. You will sideline all that disproves your belief, your heresy, your partisanship. What you will then perform is not scholarship, but an act of advocacy. It remains academic. It's no longer scholarship. It requires agility to do it. And I tell them. And then, as a supervisor, I will be observing how smartly you do it. And possibly I will give you a good mark, a good grade, as they say nowadays, a good mark, by evaluating the skill with which you are doing it, regardless of the veracity of the outcome. Then they are puzzled. Of course, I never do that. By the way, Nobel laureate in physics Richard Feynman famously called that cargo cult science. And if you don't know what it is, I invite you to read his paper on cargo cult science. That is science which is produced in order to satisfy, in his case, funders. Second choice. You may not engage in that sort of selective work and do a proper scholarly work. Confronted with an outcome that goes against your belief, you will ask yourself a moral question. That question will not be about the truth of the protocols you followed since you have decided not to engage in cargo cult science. No, no. The moral question you will have to ask yourself is the following. Why was my initial belief so wrong? Yes, I was wrong. I believed passionately in. But why did I believe in it, now that I'm proven wrong? It takes a lot of courage to admit error in perceptions, percepts of reality, especially social or political. And that is what a true scholar does. And then you have a third choice. Tell them, if you lack that moral courage, which can also be a professional courage if your career is at stake. But then maybe you should join the church, become a soccer player. Then you have a third choice, a choice of pure partisanship. You retreat from rational scholarship back into belief and say, well, yes, that is a correct outcome, but I don't like it. It does not suit me. Very few have the perversity to do that in full awareness of the fact they are doing it. But it happens. I have seen it. But that is violence against reason. This is violent. In short, in Circle 6, inside the city of hell, Dante allows us to reflect on intellectual violence. And now he moves to Circle 7, and he's going to move and look at crimes of violence. Hell 7 is indeed the dwelling of the truly violent ones, of perpetrators of violence against human nature. You will see that their crimes are not what we would today in liberal societies call violent crimes. That these are perpetrators to boil as those to be thrown in a river of boiling blood. Pity we don't do that anymore. I think it would be a very strong deterrent, intellectually, of course. These crimes against nature are quite unique, and they are loaded with meaning with regard to scholarship. Dante speaks here of the fraudster, the corrupt, the suicide, the blasphemers, and the bankers. Let us look at the main sequence of crimes laid out by Dante. I can't go through everything, of course. Suicide, blasphemy, lending money at profit. What is the logic behind that sequence? Dante is developing an argument about violence against human nature, and you will see that it's all connected to the idea of giving. Suicide. Today, suicide has become a societal issue, as they say. Bullied teenagers, harassed workers, terminal patients. But whatever the euphemism, to kill oneself or let oneself kill you is suicide. In Dante's time, suicide was an eminent crime, and for two reasons. First, it is murder. Second, it is murder of the gift of life. In the Christian tradition, but not only there, suicide is not admirable, it is not honorable, which some cultures believe it is, Shintoism, for instance, but it is a violent refusal of the gift of life. So how does a scholar commit scholarly suicide? Or to rephrase it, how does a scholar reject the gift of scholarship? It is a tough one, so let's store it for the time being. Blasphemy. All major religions, of the book or not, have some interdict against insulting the divine. The divine being the nature itself. The human shall not insult what is above the human condition. The creature shall not insult the creator. Still today in many societies, it happened in Iran 2 days ago, insulting God is punishable by death. That is why already in Leviticus 24:16, the law, the human law, responds in place of the divinity by imposing sanctions. And the law intervenes because the strange thing is that God cannot talk back in the regions of the book. So the human law takes over the response that God provides for the creature to have rejected or defiled another gift, which is a gift of language. Usury, money lending at interest against nature. I know I got eminent scholars of the history of the law here, But let me sum up a complex argument that occupied scholars from Roman times until at least the Renaissance about lending money. The lender of money who uses money as a measure to decide on rates commits a moral fault. What is moral is charity. Lending money at profit or lending expecting to be refunded is immoral. That's the idea. So let's keep that in stock also. So we have reading L7, 3 crimes against nature. All 3 bound by the idea of gift or giving. How does it relate to scholarship? Oh, I forgot. No. Let's talk about suicide. For a scholar, suicide is not to realize that I'm getting tired now. I spend too much time alone, you see, talking to the trees. Suicide. For a scholar, suicide is not to realize that scholarly activity is bound by and to the nature in which a scholar lives. Of course, as a scholar, we don't relate to God. But what is our nature? Our natural environment. Well, it is a university. The university is our natural environment. So what is the link? It doesn't mean you agree in private with the diktats and fancies of management. It means that you violate that natural environment at the university. It means that you have not fully understood what that nature requires of you. Some institutions used to and still do require adherence to a set of explicit value, faith-based. Some, in the state in particular, actually require for you to have certain political beliefs. That is their nature. And like in Dante's world, the scholar who does not comply is perceived as committing a grave injustice, a moral fault, or violence against the nature of the university, refusing what? The gift of belonging to the university. The situation is perverse when the nature of the institution is not declared contractually. Often universities speak of their values, of their vision, of their goals. Yet without having themselves a very clear idea of what it means, they are creating a nature against which the scholar can be held accountable for heresy, blasphemy, and may lead even to commit, figuratively, suicide. What about usury, the third crime against nature? You recall my argument about the opposite of giving. So here is a tropological reading. Scholarship is in essence charitable. It is a gift. Some academics are scholars, some are not, and that is fine. As for me, the gift of scholarship is generosity. Sharing without expecting a return, a profit. And conversely, accepting gracefully to be given knowledge. There are 2 factors at play here, and they are somewhat troubling. The first is about freedom, the second is about value. A true scholar must retain the right to choose with whom scholarship should be shared, and thus share it freely. Make it a real gift. Giving under duress and rules is not giving. I realize, of course, that current ideology is to push for open source and indiscriminate sharing of research products. I suggest that it is not such a good scholarly practice. Scholarship requires to be selective. A scholar's freedom is not to share everything with all and sundry. That is a false freedom, as it operates under the duress of so-called community rules, open source rules, which are propounded as being ethical, but they are not. A scholar's freedom is to exercise one's own freedom as a scholar. It means to decide who is worthy of being given the fruits of scholarship. At a simple level, we know how the internet can translate scholarly argument into political propaganda, concept into percepts, veracity into partisan opinions. That alone should guard us against placing scholarly knowledge within the reach of everyone and anyone. At a deeper level, the open source ideology, as it is an ideology, is based on a fallacy regarding the rewards of scholarship for the natural environment in which a scholar operates, here the university. Here is how. Universities expect returns on sharing all scholarship. When I say expect, I do not imply an explicit overall strategy, but as all ideologies, it is an internalized mindset hardly ever brought out in the open. That expectation is based on value, or rather, surplus value. Scholars, that's my last page, scholars create surplus value. That is wealth in excess of the work they perform and the costs attached to it. This is why institutions have developed a system of rewards to supplement salaries out of a sense, perhaps moral, perhaps amoral, in any case practical, that surplus value should be recognized without being fully admitted. As we all know, workers, real workers, have no control on surplus value. No more than scholars have control on the surplus value they create for the university. So I leave you as scholars to reflect on the surplus value of scholarship. And here, on this controversial note, we shall leave Dante and Virgil when they enter the fantastic and fiery world of Hell 8 with its 10 ditches, and finally reach, contrast, the frozen lake of Hell 9. And there they will look at evil incarnate Satan chewing the brains of three ultimate human evils, three traitors. I know that time is running, so circles 8 and 9 would take at least an hour, so we shall stop there. You're in hell, aren't you? But I'll let you imagine, on a more serious note, or sober note, about the traitors. What could be betraying scholarship or betraying a university? Now you possibly wonder, I'll conclude now, you probably wonder about my motivation, my drive, as we say today, in taking you back 700 years in an exercise of tropological reading, quite alien to our one-dimensional way of reasoning. We reason so flatly today, you know. You have noticed that I've not gotten into well-meaning phrases concerning the importance of research goals, the social responsibility of research, the scholarly safeguard against plagiarism. Oh, by the way, about plagiarism, for centuries, plagiarism was a demonstration of scholarship. Yes, produced great works. Different state of society. Clearly, about plagiarism, it is a capitalist idea of private property that casts now plagiarism as a delict. So I have tried, I hope, to raise questions, to raise doubts, to utter blasphemies also. In any event, I have tried to give you my very small gift of scholarship tonight. I expect no return. But I'm sure of this. I have not betrayed Stuart Saunders, whose memory and Anita's we honor today. And as they look down on us today, from above, from underneath, we don't really know, I am quite sure they think this university is a place for scholars. Thank you very much. Exceeded my time.
Thank you very much, Professor Salazar, for this superb lecture, which reminded us of the value of public lectures. These public lectures are meant to challenge, question, entertain and amuse, confront and inspire. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm certain you'll all agree with me that Professor Salazar achieved all of these in equal measure. Tonight has been a beautiful and elegant celebration of academic freedom, values which Stuart Saunders stood for. And like you, I am certain that Anita and Stuart are looking down, smiling. The allegory of life that you painted through Dante's 9 circles of Hades bear relevance not only for the academy, but for life as a whole. And these 9 lives of scholarship are particularly apt, and in my view, could not be more relevant to our time, with institutions of higher learning appearing to be under siege, a siege characterized by increasing levels of competition, a lack of global solidarity, and reduction in equity, a diminishing of academic freedom, growing polarization, scholars defending their ideas at all costs, and the comedic gluttony characterized by our reward systems. The risks of increasing specialization, as well as increased industrialization of academia, a growing epidemic of dissatisfied in our universities, and a scholarship driven by partisan views and personal prejudices, a recession of the value for evidence, and ultimately forgetting the charity and generosity of scholarship. These words, your words, offer an opportunity for collective reflection. And so I wish to thank you for accepting Stuart's and my invitation to deliver this lecture, which in my view has been superb in every way. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to invite you to join me in thanking distinguished Professor Philip Salazar for an outstanding third Stuart Saunders lecture. It's an uncontested lecture with no questions. However, I invite all of you to join us in the foyer for refreshments and an opportunity to engage with Professor Salazar. Thank you.
Sorry, I exceeded my time.
I really enjoyed that. If you don't mind, I would love to read your words again at pleasure for my own edification.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. On the contrary, there's so much to talk about.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, okay.
Oh, okay.
Let's make it over here.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
I didn't bring my speed point.
The recording is going to be made available and will be on the website within a week.